It had been a long, draining day at work. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and the idea of cramming myself into a crowded subway car made my skin crawl. So, I decided to walk home. The fresh air and solitude sounded like the perfect antidote to my cluttered mind. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the city. The streets were bustling, but it didn't bother me. I welcomed the noise. It felt distant, like I was walking through a dream, disconnected from everything around me. My thoughts wandered to Jenny, my wife, and I smiled to myself. I'd been looking forward to dinner with her all day, just the two of us, unwinding from the week. I was only a few blocks from home when I saw it. At first, I didn't realize it was her. I was lost in my thoughts, barely paying attention to the passing cars and people. But something, maybe a flicker of movement or just a gut feeling, made me turn my head. And there she was, Jenny. She was stepping out of a car, a silver sedan that I didn't recognize. Parked on the corner of 7th and Maple, just a few blocks from our house. I stopped in my tracks, instinctively pulling back into the shadow of a tree. It didn't make sense. Why would she be here? She usually took the bus home from work. And then I saw him. The driver. A man. I couldn't make out his face from where I stood, but I saw enough. Jenny leaned into the open window, her hair catching the last rays of sunlight, and kissed him. Not a quick, friendly peck on the cheek. No, this was something more intimate. Familiar. My heart stopped. I watched as she pulled back, her lips curving into a soft smile before she closed the door and waved him off. The car drove away, and Jenny stood there for a moment, adjusting her bag over her shoulder, before casually turning and walking in the direction of our house. Like nothing had happened, but something had. Something was wrong. I stood frozen in place, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. My chest tightened, and my pulse pounded in my ears. The world around me felt like it had tilted off its axis, everything suddenly foreign and out of place. Had I just seen that? My Jenny, my wife, kissing another man? A man who wasn't me? I froze on the spot. My feet felt glued to the pavement as I stared at the empty street where the car had just disappeared. My mind struggled to catch up with what my eyes had just seen. This can't be real, I thought, blinking rapidly as if somehow that would erase the image of Jenny kissing another man. My breath caught in my throat, and I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of disbelief. Maybe I didn't see it right. Maybe it wasn't her. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, my heart wouldn't let go. I knew her face, her smile, the way her hair fell over her shoulder when she leaned down like that. I knew every part of her. And I knew that kiss wasn't just friendly. It was too familiar, too intimate. What if I misunderstood? The thought flickered in my mind, a desperate grasp for something, anything, that would make this make sense. Maybe it was an innocent moment between colleagues, or maybe I was reading too much into it. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. There was no misinterpreting the warmth in her expression, the way she lingered just a second too long after the kiss. My chest tightened, and the pain started to spread, sharp, cold, and unforgiving. A part of me wanted to run after her, demand answers, and scream for an explanation that might somehow undo the hurt already creeping in. But I didn't move. I couldn't. All I could do was stand there, feeling the weight of betrayal settle on my shoulders. Why? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. This could all be a misunderstanding, I told myself. It could have been a colleague. Maybe a friend she's never mentioned. After all, people kiss on the cheek all the time. It didn't have to mean anything. But deep down, I knew that kiss wasn't just a casual goodbye. There was something more in the way she lingered, the softness in her eyes. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confront her, not yet. What would I even say? Accuse her of something when I wasn't completely sure? No, I needed more than a single moment on the street. I needed to be certain before I blew up our entire life together over a misunderstanding. I turned and started walking home, my mind racing. As I got closer, the familiar warmth of our house came into view, but it felt different now, tainted, somehow. This place where we had built our life together suddenly felt like a stranger's home. When I stepped inside, the smell of dinner cooking greeted me. Jenny was in the kitchen, humming softly as she moved around. She looked so at ease, like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I felt a surge of confusion. How could she be so calm, so normal? I studied her from the doorway, searching for any sign of guilt, any flicker of nervousness in her expression. but she just smiled when she saw me. "Hey, you're home early," she said, turning away from the stove to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. The same lips that had kissed someone else less than an hour ago. I forced a smile and kissed her back, my stomach twisting. "Yeah, decided to walk today," I muttered, hoping my voice didn't betray the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my head. As we sat down to eat, I told myself that I needed to be patient. I would watch, observe, and see if anything else seemed off. Maybe this had all been a mistake. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But as the evening wore on, every laugh, every word she spoke felt heavier. Wrapped in suspicion. I just need more proof, I thought, my heart still heavy with doubt. Over the next few days, the tension inside me only grew. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. And then, I started to notice things. Jenny's behavior shifted, subtly at first, but enough for me to pick up on it. She began staying late at work more often, always with some vague excuse about an important project or a last-minute meeting. I'd call her around 6, and she'd answer with that same rushed tone, saying she couldn't talk long but would be home soon. The first couple of times, I didn't think much of it. But when it became a pattern, my suspicions deepened. Then there were the phone calls. She started taking them to another room, closing the door behind her. Sometimes, I'd hear her voice muffled through the walls, talking low and soft. And when she'd come back, there was always an awkward silence between us, like she was holding something back. I didn't ask her who she was talking to. I wanted to, badly. But I wasn't ready for the answer. It wasn't just the phone calls and the late nights. There was something else, something in her eyes. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I saw it. A kind of distance, like she was somewhere else, even when we were together. The easy warmth that used to fill the air between us had thinned out, replaced by a strange coldness I couldn't quite place. When she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. When we talked, her responses felt rehearsed, like she was going through the motions. Each day, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. That I was reading too much into every little gesture, every moment of silence. But no matter how hard I tried, the nagging doubt in my chest wouldn't go away. The smallest things started to stand out. She used to text me throughout the day, little updates, jokes, dinner plans. But now, the messages came less frequently, and when they did, they were shorter and more businesslike, as if she were checking off a box, rather than sharing part of her day with me. And every time she left for work, I couldn't shake the image of her stepping out of that car, and kissing a man I didn't know. That memory clung to me, poisoning everything. Was she thinking of him when she smiled at me? Was she with him when she stayed late at the office? I felt myself slipping into a dark place, but I couldn't confront her yet. Not without more proof. I needed to be sure before I tore our life apart. But the signs were all there, staring me in the face, and no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I knew something was happening. Something I couldn't ignore much longer. The tension between us had grown unbearable. Every conversation with Jenny felt like we were walking on eggshells, both of us pretending things were normal when they were anything but. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know the truth, even if it meant confirming my worst fear. So, I made a decision. I called in sick to work one morning, telling my boss that I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie exactly, my stomach had been twisted in knots for days. But this wasn't about illness. I had a plan, and it was time to follow through. Jenny left for work at the usual time, her kiss on my cheek as distant as ever. As soon as she walked out the door, I grabbed my coat and followed her. I stayed far enough behind that she wouldn't notice, but close enough to keep her in sight. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and adrenaline driving me forward. I had never done anything like this before, but the need to know was stronger than the guilt gnawing at me. She walked down our street, just like she always did, blending into the morning crowd. But today, instead of heading straight to the bus stop, she made a sharp turn and walked toward a side street I hadn't noticed before. My pulse quickened as I followed her at a distance, keeping to the shadows of the buildings. And then I saw it. The silver sedan, parked just a little way down the street, waiting for her. I ducked behind a parked car, watching from a distance as she approached it. The window rolled down, and there he was, him. The same man from that day, sitting behind the wheel, smiling at her like they were the only two people in the world. I watched as she got into the passenger seat, her movements casual, like this was something they did all the time. No hesitation, no second thoughts. She leaned in, and they exchanged a quick kiss before he started the engine. The sight of it hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no mistaking it this time. This wasn't just a friendly colleague or some casual acquaintance. The kiss was brief, but it was loaded with a familiarity I could never mistake. They were more than just coworkers. I followed the car as it pulled away, sticking to side streets and alleys, keeping my distance but never losing sight of them. They drove toward her office, which wasn't a surprise. But instead of stopping in front of the building, they pulled into an underground parking garage. I hesitated at the entrance, my heart pounding in my ears, afraid that if I got too close, they'd see me. I waited for a few minutes, watching as they disappeared into the depths of the garage. My hands shook with a mix of rage and dread. I wanted to storm in there and confront them both right on the spot. Demand answers. But what good would that do? I didn't have a plan. All I had was this sinking feeling in my gut. This growing certainty that Jenny was betraying me in ways I hadn't even imagined. I waited for a few more minutes before deciding to approach the building. I couldn't follow them inside, but I could watch. I could see where they went and what they did. Maybe I could gather more proof, something solid, undeniable. I hung around the entrance to the office, trying to blend in with the morning rush of workers streaming in and out of the building. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of someone who looked like Jenny. But it wasn't her. She had vanished into the office with him, and I had no idea when she would come back out. Hours passed, my body tense with anticipation, frustration gnawing at me. I kept expecting her to emerge, but she never did. Every second felt like an eternity, the weight of what I had seen sinking deeper into my chest. I knew, deep down, that I had already seen enough. That kiss in the car was more than enough proof. But part of me wanted to keep watching, keep following, as if more evidence would make it easier to accept. It didn't. Finally, around lunch, I saw them again. They walked out of the office together, side by side, laughing about something. Jenny's face was bright, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in months. She looked happy. With him. They didn't see me as they crossed the street to a nearby cafe, taking a seat at one of the outdoor tables. They sat close, leaning in as if sharing some private joke. My stomach churned as I watched them. They were so comfortable, so relaxed together. It was like they had done this 1,000 times before. My heart ached at the sight of it, the realization that I was an outsider to my marriage. I couldn't watch it any longer. I turned and walked away, my thoughts a storm of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. All the signs I'd been trying to ignore were true. Jenny was with someone else, and I had no idea how long it had been going on. As I walked back toward our house, one question kept repeating in my head: what now? The next morning, after the shock of the previous day's discovery had settled into a dull ache, I knew I had to figure out who he was. The man I had seen Jenny with, the one she was smiling at like he held the keys to her happiness. His face was now burned into my memory, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, his confident grin, the casual way he kissed my wife. I needed answers. I sat down at my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I felt like a detective digging for clues, but the reality was far worse. This wasn't some faceless case. This was my life, Jenny's life, our life. I typed in the name of her company and pulled up the employee directory. I scrolled through the list of names, my pulse quickening as I looked for anything that might match the man I'd seen. And there it was, Mark Anderson. His name stood out like a red flag. I clicked on his profile, my stomach tightening as a photo loaded. It was him, dark hair, square jaw, a neatly pressed suit. He had that same smug look on his face. Like nothing in the world could touch him. Mark Anderson, a senior marketing manager. Jenny had mentioned his name a few times in passing, casually thrown into conversation as if he were just another coworker. Mark's team is running this new project, or Mark had a great idea in the meeting today. Little details that now felt like they'd been hiding something much bigger. I hadn't paid attention then, but now every mention of him felt like a breadcrumb leading to this moment. A colleague, a man she saw every day. They worked late together, went to meetings together, and probably ate lunch together. And now, apparently, kissed in parked cars together. The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some fleeting affair with a stranger. This was something that had been growing right under my nose, day after day, week after week. I stared at his face on the screen, my fists clenched tightly by my sides. A mix of rage and humiliation burned in my chest. I wanted to march straight into that office and demand answers from both of them. How could Jenny do this? How could she let this Mark, this man I'd never even met, come between us? The urge to confront her right then and there nearly overwhelmed me. I pictured myself storming into the office, throwing accusations, demanding to know how long this had been going on. I imagined the shocked look on Jenny's face, the panic in her eyes as she scrambled for an explanation. I wanted to see her guilt laid bare. I wanted her to feel the same pain I was feeling now. But then, a colder, more calculating part of me held back. I realized that an emotional outburst might only make things worse. What if she denied everything? What if she turned the situation around, making me seem like the paranoid husband jumping to conclusions? Worse, what if she admitted it, and the raw truth came spilling out in a way that I wasn't ready to hear? I sat there, staring at Mark's smug photo, my anger simmering just below the surface. Confronting her without a plan could lead to a chaotic blowout, a dramatic scene where we both said things we couldn't take back. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The truth was, I needed more than just a name and a few stolen glances. I needed to know everything. How long it had been going on, why she'd done it, what their relationship meant to her. As much as I wanted to barge in and demand answers, I knew a calculated approach would give me more control. I would wait, gather more information, and confront her when I was ready. When I had all the pieces. That way, there would be no room for lies or excuses. She wouldn't be able to wriggle out of it with some half-baked explanation about work stress or just friends. But the waiting, the quiet agony of watching her go about her day, pretending nothing had changed, was going to tear me apart. Each time she smiled at me, every time she kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, I would be wondering if she was going to see him. If she would be kissing him later. The thought made me sick. For now, I swallowed my anger, pushing it deep down where it couldn't betray me. I would play my part, just like she was playing hers. I would smile, kiss her goodbye, and pretend that everything was fine. But inside, I was watching. I was waiting. I closed the computer. Mark Anderson's face disappearing from the screen, but not from my mind. He had become the symbol of everything I'd lost, everything that had been stolen from me. And Jenny was no longer the person I thought she was. The worst part was, I still loved her. Despite everything, I couldn't just flip a switch and stop. That was the hardest part of all, the inner battle between my love for her and the growing hatred for what she had done. It was tearing me apart, one silent day at a time. I knew one thing for certain, when the moment came, when I finally confronted her, it wouldn't just be about the affair. It would be about everything, every lie, every stolen glance, every whispered phone call. I would make sure she felt the full weight of her betrayal. But until then, I would bide my time. The game wasn't over yet. I couldn't stop thinking about it, Jenny and Mark, laughing together behind my back, living in a bubble where their betrayal went unnoticed. Every time I looked at her now, I saw the lies in her eyes, the distance between us that had once been filled with trust. And every time she left for work, knowing she would see him, my anger grew like wildfire, consuming whatever patience I had left. It wasn't enough just to know. Knowing had only made it worse. Every moment with her felt like a performance. A sick joke where I played the fool. I couldn't confront her yet, not while she had the upper hand. But I wasn't going to let this go quietly. No, she would pay for this, and so would Mark. They both needed to feel the weight of what they had done. The opportunity presented itself when I overheard Jenny talking about the upcoming corporate party. It was an annual event, the kind where everyone from her office came together to celebrate the year's successes, drink too much, and put on their best faces. This year, it would be at an upscale hotel downtown. A formal affair, with speeches, toasts, and dancing. The perfect setting for what I had in mind. As she casually mentioned the party over dinner one night, I nodded along, pretending to be interested in her work chatter. But inside, my mind was already spinning, piecing together how I could turn this event into their downfall. The thought of them, all dressed up, acting like nothing was wrong while I sat there, watching their every move, it made my blood boil. I couldn't let them get away with it. Not without making them feel the humiliation I had been living with for weeks. The more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. I wouldn't confront them in private, where they could make excuses, offer empty apologies, or deny everything. No, this needed to be public. Painful. The kind of exposure they couldn't escape from. I wanted their colleagues, the same people they worked with every day, the ones who respected them, to see exactly what kind of people they were. I wanted to tear down the image they'd built of themselves, just like they'd torn apart my trust. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The plan to expose Jenny and Mark at the corporate party was beginning to take shape in my mind, but I knew I couldn't rely on suspicion alone. If I wanted to ruin them both, I needed undeniable proof, something that would leave no room for explanations, no wiggle room for lies. Over the next week, I became a shadow in my own home, quietly observing and waiting for the right moments. Jenny continued her routine, unaware that I was watching her every move with a growing sense of purpose. Every time she picked up her phone to text or left the house for work, my gut twisted, but I held it together. My patience would pay off. I started small. Each morning, I pretended to leave for work as usual, but instead of heading to the office, I doubled back and found a vantage point near our house. I watched as Jenny left, always carefully noting the time and her route. Some days, she took the bus to her office, but on others, on those days, she would meet Mark's car a few blocks away. It became clear that they had a routine, one they believed was too discreet to be noticed. I would wait until she was a safe distance away, then follow, careful not to be seen. On the days she met Mark, I would trail them from afar, staying just out of sight. At first, I didn't dare get too close, fearing they might spot me. But as I grew more confident, I began to follow them more boldly, taking photos whenever I could. Jenny getting into his car, them laughing together, their heads close as they spoke. I snapped pictures of every moment that would make it clear to anyone who saw them, this wasn't just a friendship. There was something deeper, something intimate, between them. It wasn't enough just to watch, though. I needed more concrete evidence, proof of the affair that went beyond just speculation or images that could be brushed off. I needed to dig into their communication, where they would have let their guard down, feeling safe behind the screen of their phones. That's when I started checking Jenny's phone. It was easier than I expected. She still trusted me enough to leave it lying around the house, often unlocked, when she stepped into the shower or went to grab something from another room. At first, the thought of invading her privacy made my stomach turn. But the memory of her kissing Mark, the way she had lied to my face over and over again, hardened my resolve. She had already broken our trust. This was just me finding the truth. The first time I opened her phone, my hands trembled slightly, the weight of what I was about to do settling over me. I navigated to her messages and found his name quickly, Mark. My heart raced as I scrolled through their conversations. The texts were casual at first, mostly about work. But it didn't take long before the tone shifted. I found messages sent late at night, long after the workday should have ended. "Miss you already," one read, followed by a winking emoji. Another, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it." The pit in my stomach deepened with each word I read. This wasn't just an affair, it was an ongoing relationship, filled with secrets and moments I hadn't been a part of. My fingers moved quickly, taking screenshots of the most damning texts, the ones that left no doubt. I saved the images to my phone and quietly closed hers, making sure everything looked just as she had left it. I repeated this process over the next few days, each time finding more messages and more evidence. Sometimes they talked about meetings at hotels, thinly veiled behind the guise of work dinners. Other times, they reminisced about times they had sneaked away together during office hours, laughing at how no one suspected a thing. Every message felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but I couldn't stop. The more I found, the more determined I became. But it wasn't just the texts. One night, as I scrolled through her phone, I found photos. There they were, selfies of Jenny and Mark, arms wrapped around each other, faces lit with the kind of happiness that should have been ours. There were photos of them at work functions, lunches, and even a weekend trip I had no idea about. The weight of their deception pressed down on me, but I didn't let it break me. Instead, I saved every image and every message. They would be my weapons when the time came. By the end of the week, I had more than enough. I had the texts, the photos, and the timeline of their affair stretching back months, longer than I had even suspected. They had been lying to me for nearly a year, hiding behind their professional facade, all while I had been none the wiser. But now, I knew everything. And soon, so would everyone else. I compiled everything into a neat, damning folder on my phone, labeled innocuously so that no one would suspect its contents if they happened upon it. I had what I needed to make sure that when I revealed the truth, There would be no way for them to deny it, no excuses they could make. Now, all I had to do was wait for the corporate party. The stage was set, and when the time came, I would be ready. Ready to destroy the lives of the two people who had torn mine apart. The days passed like a slow, tortuous crawl as I waited for the corporate party to arrive. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone I could trust, someone who understood the stakes and the weight of what I was about to do. That's when I thought of James. James and I had been friends since college. We had shared everything, late-night study sessions, wild parties, and even heart-to-heart talks about relationships. He had been there for me through thick and thin, and while we had drifted apart in recent years, I knew he still worked at the same company as Jenny. It was the perfect connection I needed to execute my plan. I reached out to him that evening, asking if he could meet up for a drink. "I have something important to discuss." I texted, the message heavy with meaning. He replied quickly, his curiosity piqued. "Sure, meet you at the pub on 5th? I arrived at the bar first, my heart racing as I took a seat in a dimly lit corner. The familiar surroundings felt oddly comforting, but my thoughts were clouded with the gravity of what I was about to ask. When James walked in, his face broke into a grin, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of nostalgia for our old friendship. "Tommy, good to see you, man." He clapped me on the back and slid into the seat across from me. We ordered drinks, and I did my best to engage in casual conversation, but my mind was elsewhere. "All right, what's on your mind?" James asked, sensing my unease. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to reveal. "James, I need your help. It's about Jenny." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "I found out she's been seeing someone. A colleague. His name is Mark." His expression shifted, curiosity morphing into concern. "What, are you sure?" I nodded, pulling out my phone and showing him the folder filled with screenshots and photos. I watched as his eyes widened, his face contorting in disbelief. "Damn, Tommy. I had no idea." He shook his head, a mix of sympathy and anger crossing his features. "I'm sorry, man. Thanks. I need to expose them. I can't just let this slide." I looked him in the eye, searching for understanding. "I want to do it at the corporate party next week." James raised an eyebrow, a cautious smile creeping onto his lips. "You've got a plan?" I nodded, outlining the details of my scheme. "I want to slip the photos and messages into a presentation during the event. When everyone's watching, I'll make sure the truth comes out." "Wow, that's bold," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I like it. It'll make an impact." "I'll help you, Tommy." A wave of relief washed over me. James had always been a loyal friend, and his support gave me the confidence I needed. "Thanks, man. I knew I could count on you." "All right, let's figure out how to make this happen," he said, his tone turning serious. "We need to be strategic about it. We can't let anyone catch on before the big reveal." Over the next hour, we sketched out a plan. James explained how the presentations for the corporate party were set up, including the tech team responsible for them. He had worked closely with them before and was confident he could gain access to the system. "Here's what we'll do," he said, leaning in. "I'll get into the conference room the day before and set up a flash drive with the photos and texts. I can label it as part of the year in review presentation. During the party, when everyone's distracted, it'll just slide right in." I felt a grin stretch across my face, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "That's perfect. We'll catch them completely off guard. Just make sure you're ready for the fallout." "This could get messy," James warned, his brow furrowing. "People will be shocked. Jenny might even try to deny it." "I'll be ready. I want everyone to know exactly what she's done," I replied, my voice firm. "I want her to feel the same humiliation I felt every day since I found out." We spent the rest of the night refining our plan and discussing the details and logistics. Each piece of the puzzle fell into place, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of hope mixed with anticipation. I was taking control back, and with James's help, I would ensure that Jenny and Mark's deceit would be exposed in front of everyone. As we finished our drinks, I felt a sense of camaraderie rekindling between us. James might have been just a friend from the past, but in this moment, he was my ally, my partner in revenge. And soon, the truth would rise like a tide, washing away the lies that had tainted my life. By the time we parted ways, I was filled with a sense of purpose. The corporate party was just days away, and I was ready to unleash the truth. The countdown had begun, and the end of Jenny and Mark's facade was coming fast. The day of the corporate party arrived, and I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and dread. This was it, the culmination of weeks of careful planning and patience. I had rehearsed the moment in my mind countless times, each scenario playing out like a twisted movie. Today, Jenny and Mark would finally face the consequences of their betrayal. As I arrived at the hotel, the atmosphere buzzed with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. The lobby was elegantly decorated, lights twinkling overhead, and the aroma of delicious food wafted through the air. I stepped inside, forcing a smile as I greeted colleagues, keeping my demeanor casual and friendly. I needed to blend in, to make sure no one suspected a thing. In a corner of the room, I spotted Jenny and Mark, laughing together, completely at ease, their bodies leaning closer than they should have been. They were so engrossed in their little world, unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. Jenny looked radiant in her sleek dress, her laughter ringing out like a melody, while Mark stood beside her, charming and handsome as always. They were the picture of an innocent friendship. A perfect facade. I felt a surge of anger, but I quickly swallowed it down. Today wasn't about my feelings, it was about their reckoning. I took a deep breath and pushed through the crowd, making my way toward the bar for a drink, my mind sharp and focused. I couldn't allow anything to distract me from the task at hand. As the evening progressed, people began to gather in the main conference room for the presentation. I casually took my seat, watching the crowd fill the room with cheer. Colleagues chatted and laughter filled the air, but in the back of my mind, I was calculating the timing of everything. I caught a glimpse of James in the front, giving me a quick nod. He was ready. The presentation began, showcasing highlights from the past year, team achievements, office parties, and memorable moments captured on camera. I played my part, clapping along and maintaining my facade, but my heart raced with anticipation as I watched the slideshow unfold. Each slide that passed made the tension in my chest grow tighter. The moment of truth drawing closer. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. The screen shifted from cheerful images of employees at work to a title card that read the year in review. The room erupted in applause, everyone buzzing with excitement, and I felt a thrill run through me. Suddenly, without warning, the next slide cut to a photograph of Jenny and Mark, laughing together in a restaurant, completely unaware of the chaos that was about to ensue. Gasps filled the room as people leaned forward. Confused, I could feel the energy shift as the crowd began to murmur, glancing at one another, trying to piece together what they were seeing. And then came the next slide, a screenshot of their texts, intimate messages laid bare for all to see. "Miss you already, last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you at the party." My heart raced as the whispers escalated, voices rising in shock and disbelief. Jenny and Mark froze, their faces draining of color as they turned toward the screen. Horror etched into their expressions. The room fell silent, the laughter and chatter replaced by a thick tension that enveloped us all. I watched as Jenny's eyes widened, her mouth opening in disbelief, searching for a way to deny what was being shown. Mark stood beside her, his expression shifting from confusion to anger as realization hit him. They were trapped, their secret out in the open, and I felt a rush of satisfaction course through me. The audience reacted with shock, some covering their mouths in disbelief. Others whispering among themselves. The atmosphere crackled with tension as everyone absorbed the betrayal laid out before them. This wasn't just a scandal, it was a public shaming, and I had orchestrated it all. As the presentation continued to display their exchanges, I stood up from my seat, feeling an overwhelming sense of empowerment. "So, this is the truth about our lovely colleague and her friend," I announced, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "For months, Jenny has been lying to me while building this facade. And Mark has been complicit in it." Gasps echoed through the room as I felt the eyes of my colleagues turn toward me, many of them glancing between me and the couple. I took a deep breath, watching as Jenny and Mark stood frozen, unable to respond, their smiles gone, their world unraveling. "This isn't just a betrayal of me," I continued, my heart racing with adrenaline. "It's a betrayal of everyone who trusted them. And tonight, I wanted to make sure everyone knew who they were." The murmurs grew louder, and I could see the embarrassment creeping across their faces, the shame settling in as the reality of their actions sank in. I relished the moment, feeling the weight of my pain finally lifting. The rest of the crowd remained stunned, their eyes glued to the screen, and the evidence of Jenny and Mark's infidelity seared into their minds. I took a step back, letting the truth wash over everyone, feeling the satisfaction of vindication wash over me. I had fought for my truth, and now, it was out for the world to see. The room buzzed with shock and disbelief, but I didn't care. I had delivered my message. Jenny and Mark could no longer hide behind their lies. They were exposed and stripped bare in front of their colleagues, and I savored every second of their humiliation. At that moment, as I watched their worlds collapse around them, I knew I had reclaimed my power. The silence was deafening, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Justice was served, and I was ready to walk away. The chaos of the corporate party lingered in the air long after the lights dimmed and the laughter faded. What had started as a celebration had transformed into a spectacle of humiliation, a dark stain on the lives of two people I once called my wife and her lover. The days that followed the revelation were nothing short of catastrophic for both Jenny and Mark. Jenny lost her job the very next day. The HR department wasted no time addressing the fallout from the party. Whispers echoed in every corner of the office, and the once bustling hallways now felt charged with an uncomfortable tension. I could only imagine the conversations that unfolded behind closed doors, the accusations and the blame thrown around like confetti in the wind. Then there was Mark, who faced his reckoning. As Jenny's colleague, his involvement in the affair painted him with the same brush of disgrace. The camaraderie he had built with his peers evaporated, leaving him standing alone amidst a sea of judgment. Meetings turned into awkward silences, and his once popular presence in the office was replaced by whispers and pointed fingers. Mark had always been the charming guy everyone loved to be around. Now, he was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a man whose reputation lay in ruins. I learned from James, who still kept in touch with a few colleagues, that Mark had been called into the boss's office shortly after the party. The discussions that took place there were shrouded in secrecy, but the outcome was evident. His position at the company had become untenable, and I could only imagine the humiliation of facing a room full of people who now viewed him with contempt. As the weeks rolled on, both Jenny and Mark faced the consequences of their actions in stark isolation. They were left to confront the fallout of their choices alone, without the support of friends or colleagues. I heard through the grapevine that Jenny was actively looking for new employment, but her reputation preceded her. The stories surrounding her betrayal made potential employers wary, leaving her with dwindling prospects and a tarnished name. On my end, life continued. My colleagues, while supportive, also treated me with a newfound caution. Some expressed sympathy, while others viewed me as a man who had taken a drastic step to reclaim his dignity. The narrative of my pain transformed into a story of vindication, a tale that spread like wildfire through the office. But while I found solace in the truth being revealed, I couldn't shake off the lingering remnants of loss. The isolation that Jenny faced felt both deserved and tragic. I couldn't deny that she had brought this upon herself, yet I remembered the moments of laughter and love we had shared. I couldn't help but wonder if there had been a path we could have taken that wouldn't have led us here, a path where betrayal hadn't marred our lives. But those thoughts were quickly silenced by the memories of her betrayal. In the aftermath of the unraveling, I watched as both Jenny and Mark attempted to rebuild their lives. But it was evident that they were no longer the same people. Their smiles were gone, replaced by the weight of regret and shame. And while they were lost to each other and their once cherished careers, I found myself looking ahead. As painful as it was, I realized I was finally free. The chains of deceit that had bound me were shattered, and though I carried scars from the experience, I had emerged with a new resolve. The journey ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I would move forward, leaving the ghosts of my past behind, ready to embrace whatever came next. And so, while Jenny and Mark faced the consequences of their choices, I stepped into a new chapter of my life, determined to rebuild and redefine my own story. As I stood at the window of my apartment, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, a wave of mixed emotions washed over me. The city sprawled beneath me, vibrant and alive, but I felt like an outsider looking in. I had achieved what I set out to do. Jenny and Mark were exposed, and their deceit was laid bare for the world to see. Yet, instead of the elation I had anticipated, I was left with an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The thrill of the reveal had been exhilarating, a high that pulsed through my veins as the truth unraveled before my colleagues. Watching their faces shift from shock to disbelief, then to pity for me, had felt like a vindication, a moment where the wrongs had been righted. I had envisioned this moment countless times, fantasizing about the joy I would feel as I watched the two of them squirm in their humiliation. But now, as the reality settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling of desolation that hung heavy in the air. What had I truly gained from all this? Yes, I had reclaimed my dignity and confronted the betrayal, but at what cost? The thrill of victory felt hollow, a fleeting moment overshadowed by the destruction of the life I had built with Jenny. I couldn't ignore the fact that our shared memories, once filled with love and laughter, had transformed into a bitter reminder of what we had lost. Every laugh we shared now felt tainted, every moment we spent together a stark contrast to the betrayal that had consumed us. I had wanted justice, yet it tasted bitter on my tongue. As much as I wanted to believe that exposing them would bring closure, I felt a gnawing void instead. I had fought against the pain of betrayal, but in doing so, I had also lost a part of myself. I turned away from the window, taking a seat on the couch. The remnants of the past lingered in every corner of the room, a reminder of the life I had once cherished. I picked up my phone and scrolled through our old photos, the ones that captured the good times, the adventures, the milestones, the moments of connection. I felt a stab of grief as I stared at the smiling faces, realizing that those memories were now shrouded in hurt. I had won the battle, but the war left me feeling defeated. Was this really what I had wanted? To see Jenny stripped of her dignity, isolated, and shamed? I knew deep down that she was not entirely to blame. Betrayal had a way of clouding judgment, twisting love into something unrecognizable. We had both played a part in the unraveling of our relationship, and the weight of that realization settled heavily on my chest. With a deep sigh, I put the phone down and leaned back, closing my eyes. The silence of the room was deafening, and I longed for the comforting sounds of life outside. I didn't want to dwell on the past any longer, I wanted to move forward. Yet, moving forward felt daunting. The path ahead was uncertain, and I feared the loneliness that might accompany it. I had dreamed of a clean break, a fresh start, but now I found myself standing at a crossroads. I could choose to hold onto the anger and resentment, allowing it to fester within me, or I could let it go, embracing the uncertainty of what lay ahead. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the skyline, I made a decision. I would not allow this chapter to define me. I would learn from the pain, of the heartache, and I would strive to become a better version of myself. I would take the lessons of betrayal, loss, and resilience, and weave them into the fabric of my future. With that thought, I opened my eyes and stood up. The city was still alive with the hustle and bustle of the evening, and I realized that while my past was filled with sorrow, my future was still unwritten. I had the power to shape it, to fill it with hope and new beginnings. And so, as I stepped away from the shadows of my past, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. I had conquered the battle of betrayal, but now it was time to conquer the journey ahead, one step at a time.